The science lab was silent except for the hum of machines, until the sound of tearing fabric shattered the stillness. Lila Carter didn't scream when her shirt sleeve ripped open, didn't cower as laughter erupted around her. But when her fist connected with Jake Mercer's jaw with a sickening crack, the entire school would remember this moment. This wasn't just a fight. It was the first domino to fall in a chain reaction that would expose Oak Ridge High's darkest secrets. From which country are you enjoying this story? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe now because what happens next will shock you beyond belief. Something will happen in this story that you would have never imagined. A simple schoolyard confrontation is about to unravel a criminal empire hiding in plain sight, and the quiet girl everyone underestimated holds the key to it all. The truth is coming, and nothing will ever be the same. The science lab was quiet except for the faint bubbling of chemicals and the scratch of pencils on paper. Lila Carter sat at her usual table in the back, her shoulders slightly hunched, her dark hair falling like a curtain between her and the rest of the class. She preferred it this way, unnoticed, undisturbed. The less attention she drew, the safer she felt. Across the room, Jake Mercer leaned back in his chair, smirking at something one of his friends whispered. He was the kind of guy who filled a room without trying, broad-shouldered, loud, the kind of person who expected laughter when he spoke. And usually, he got it. Teachers turned a blind eye, students stepped out of his way, and the world bent just enough to make sure Jake Mercer never faced consequences. Lila knew better than to look his way. She kept her eyes on her notebook, her fingers tightening slightly around her pen. She had perfected the art of invisibility over the years. If she didn't move too much, didn't speak unless necessary, didn't meet anyone's gaze for too long, she could slip through the days untouched. But today, that wasn't enough. A shadow fell over her desk. She didn't look up, but the air around her changed, the scent of cheap cologne, the shift in breathing, the way the light dimmed just slightly as someone blocked the fluorescence above. "Hey, Lila." Jake's voice was all false friendliness, the kind that made her skin prickle. She kept writing, her hand moving steadily, pretending she hadn't heard. A snicker from one of his friends. "You deaf now too?" Jake's hand came down on her notebook, slamming it shut. "Or just too good to talk to us?" Lila exhaled slowly. She lifted her head, just enough to meet his eyes, but not enough to challenge. "I'm working." Jake grinned. "Yeah? On what?" He snatched her notebook before she could stop him, flipping it open. "Oh wow, notes. How exciting." His friends laughed on cue. Lila reached for it, but Jake yanked it back, holding it just out of reach. "Come on, take it." He waved it tauntingly. "Or are you too slow for that too?" She stood, her chair scraping against the floor. The sound was too loud in the quiet room. A few students glanced over, but most pretended not to notice. This wasn't new. Jake messed with people. Sometimes they fought back. Usually they didn't. Lila reached again, and this time, Jake didn't move away. He let her grab the notebook, then with a sharp tug, he ripped it in half. Paper tore. The sound was small, almost insignificant. Lila stared at the ruined pages in her hands. Jake smirked. "Oops." She didn't move, didn't speak. Then his hand shot out, fingers hooking into the collar of her shirt. "You know, you really should get better clothes." The fabric ripped. Cold air hit her shoulder. The sound, that awful tearing sound, seemed to echo. For a second, the room was perfectly still. Then laughter erupted. Lila didn't look down. She didn't cover herself. She just stood there, her hands at her sides, staring at Jake. His grin faltered just for a second. Then her fist connected with his jaw. The impact was clean, precise. Jake's head snapped back, his body following, and he hit the floor with a thud that shook the lab tables. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Lila flexed her fingers. Her knuckles stung, but the pain was distant, unimportant. Jake groaned, rolling onto his side, his hand pressed to his face. Blood seeped between his fingers. No one moved. No one spoke. Lila turned, picked up her bag, and walked out. The whispers started before she even reached the door. The hallway outside the science lab stretched empty as Lila stepped through the door. Her breathing came steady, controlled, but her pulse hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly pale glow. Somewhere down the hall, a locker slammed. The sound made her flinch, an old habit she thought she'd unlearned years ago. She adjusted the torn fabric of her shirt, fingers trembling now that no one could see. The cotton gaped at the shoulder, exposing the edge of a faded scar that curled toward her collarbone. Another memory she tried to keep covered. Behind her, the classroom door burst open. "What the hell, Carter?" Mr. Donovan's voice bounced off the locker-lined walls. The biology teacher stood framed in the doorway, his face flushed beneath thinning gray hair. "Get back here this instant." Lila kept walking. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. The bell would ring in 3 minutes. She just needed to make it to the girls' bathroom before the halls flooded with students. "Carter, I'm not joking." Donovan's footsteps followed her. "You just assaulted another student." A bitter taste filled Lila's mouth. Assault. Funny how no one ever used that word when Jake Mercer shoved freshmen into lockers or, accidentally, tripped special ed kids in the cafeteria. She picked up her pace, turning the corner toward the senior lockers. The bathroom door swung open with more force than necessary. Lila checked the stalls, empty. She turned the faucet on full blast and splashed cold water on her face. The mirror showed a stranger, dark eyes blazing, cheeks flushed, lips pressed into a thin white line. The quiet girl who never made trouble was gone. In her place stood someone dangerous. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Lila!" A familiar voice. "You in there?" Meera Patel. The only person at Oak Ridge who ever bothered saying her name like it mattered. Lila wiped her hands on her jeans. "Yeah." The door creaked open. Myra's round face appeared, her brow furrowed behind thick-framed glasses. "Holy shit," she breathed, taking in Lila's torn shirt. "They're saying you knocked Jake Mercer out cold." Lila turned back to the sink. The water ran pink where it rinsed blood from her knuckles. "He started it." "No kidding." Meera rummaged in her backpack and pulled out a gray hoodie. "Before someone sees you walking around like that." The fabric smelled like lavender detergent. Lila pulled it on gratefully, the sleeves swallowing her hands whole. "Thanks." Meera leaned against the sink, studying Lila's face. "You okay?" The question caught her off guard. No one ever asked her that. Not after the incident freshman year, not when she came back from suspension with fresh bruises and a broken spirit. Lila opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth lodged in her throat like a stone. Outside, the bell screamed. Footsteps pounded past the bathroom door, laughter and shouted conversations bouncing off the tiles. Morning announcements crackled over the intercom, barely audible over the din. Meera grabbed Lila's wrist. "Come on. We're skipping." "What?" "Principal's office is gonna be looking for you." Meera adjusted her glasses with her free hand. "And trust me, you don't want to be here when Jake wakes up and realizes what happened." Lila let herself be pulled toward the emergency exit. The alarm would sound if they opened it, but Meera had a trick. She wedged a textbook in the doorframe and slipped them through the narrow gap. Sunlight hit Lila's face as they emerged behind the gymnasium, the smell of cut grass replacing the school's antiseptic odor. They ran across the football field, backpacks bouncing, until they reached the chain-link fence separating school property from the woods. Meera knew the loose panel, same one the stoners used to sneak off campus. They squeezed through, branches snapping underfoot as they plunged into the trees. Only when they reached the old railroad tracks did Meera stop, hands on her knees as she caught her breath. "Okay," she panted. "Oh, what the hell was that?" Lila stared down at her hands. The knuckles were swelling now, purple bruises forming beneath the skin. She flexed her fingers, testing the pain. "He ripped my shirt." "Yeah, no shit." Meera wiped sweat from her forehead. "But you, Lila, you dropped him with one punch. Since when do you know how to do that?" The wind rustled the leaves overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew. Lila closed her eyes and saw her father's face, felt his large hands adjusting her stance in their cramped garage. "Elbows in," he'd say. "Power comes from your core, not your arms." Lila. She opened her eyes. My dad taught me. Before. Myra's expression softened. Oh. A beat of silence. You never talk about him. Lila picked at a loose thread on Myra's hoodie. I know. They sat on the sun-warmed railroad ties, listening to the woods come alive around them. A squirrel chattered in the oak tree above. Somewhere to their left, a creek gurgled over rocks. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Mira pulled 2 protein bars from her bag and handed one to Lila. So what's the plan? You can't go back there today. Lila unwrapped the bar mechanically. The chocolate tasted like sawdust in her mouth. I know. They'll suspend you. Maybe expel you. I know. Mira sighed. And Jake? He's not just gonna let this go. A cold certainty settled in Lila's stomach. She'd known the moment her fist connected that there was no going back. Jake Mercer didn't lose fights. Jake Mercer didn't get humiliated in front of the entire junior class. And most importantly, Jake Mercer never let anything slide. The crunch of gravel underfoot made them both freeze. Lila's body tensed, her hands curling into fists before she could stop them. Relax, Mira whispered. Probably just dash. The bushes rustled. 3 figures emerged from the tree line. Not teachers. Not security. Worse. Tyler Briggs, Jake's best friend and linebacker on the varsity team, cracked his knuckles. Beside him, Ryan Cho smirked, his Letterman jacket hanging open. And bringing up the rear, limping slightly but with murder in his eyes, was Jake himself, a fresh bruise blooming across his jaw. Well, Jake said, spitting a glob of blood onto the tracks. Look what we found. The forest air grew thick with tension as Jake wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes never leaving Lila's face. The afternoon sunlight filtering through the trees cast jagged shadows across his swollen jaw, making the fresh bruise appear even darker. Behind him, Tyler cracked his knuckles again, a theatrical display Lila recognized from countless hallway intimidation tactics. Mira grabbed Lila's arm, her fingers digging in painfully. We should run, she whispered urgently. Lila didn't move. Running would only delay the inevitable. She'd spent 3 years at Oak Ridge High trying to disappear, and where had that gotten her? A torn shirt, a reputation as an easy target, and now 3 angry athletes blocking her only exit. Jake took a step forward, his sneakers crunching on the gravel bed between railroad ties. You got lucky in the lab, he said, his voice deceptively calm. Teacher was right there. But out here, he spread his arms wide. No witnesses. Tyler and Ryan fanned out to either side, cutting off any escape routes. Ryan pulled something from his pocket, a switchblade that caught the sunlight with a dangerous glint. Lila's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about payback anymore. Mira made a small, terrified noise beside her. Lila shifted slightly, putting herself between her friend and the boys. Let Mira go, she said, keeping her voice steady. This is between me and you, Jake. Jake barked out a laugh. Oh, now you're giving orders? He nodded to Tyler. Check this out, the mouse thinks she's a lion. Tyler lunged without warning. His meaty hand closed around Myra's backpack, yanking her backward. Mira screamed as she lost her balance, falling hard on the railroad ties. Something inside Lila snapped. Time seemed to slow as she moved. Years of suppressed rage channeled into perfect, brutal efficiency. When Tyler reached for her, she caught his wrist, twisted, and drove her knee into his elbow joint. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the clearing, followed by Tyler's howl of pain. Ryan came at her next, switchblade flashing. Lila pivoted, letting the blade whistle past her face. She grabbed his arm, used his own momentum to flip him over her hip. He landed with a thud that knocked the wind from his lungs, the knife skittering across the gravel. Then Jake was there, swinging wildly. His fist grazed Lila's cheekbone, the impact sending white stars across her vision. She staggered back, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her cheek. You bitch! Jake roared. You broke Tyler's arm. Lila spat blood onto the tracks. You're next. Jake charged. Lila waited until the last possible second before sidestepping and driving her elbow into his spine as he passed. Jake went down hard, face first onto the unforgiving railroad ties. Before he could rise, Lila planted a knee in his back and wrenched his arm up between his shoulder blades. "Listen carefully," she hissed in his ear. "You're going to leave me alone. You're going to leave Mira alone. And if I ever see you so much as look at another student the wrong way, I'll finish what I started today. Understand?" Jake whimpered beneath her. Ryan groaned, clutching his ribs. Tyler cradled his broken arm, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. Mira stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth. The woods had gone eerily quiet, as if even the birds were holding their breath. Lila released Jake and stood, her entire body trembling with adrenaline. She wiped her bloody knuckles on her jeans and turned to Mira. "Let's go." They didn't run this time. Lila walked away with her head high, the late afternoon sun warm on her back. Behind them, the sounds of pained groans and muttered curses faded into the rustling leaves. Mira waited until they were back on school property before speaking. "Holy shit," she breathed. "Who are you?" Lila flexed her aching hands. The knuckles were split open, the bruises already deepening. "Someone who's done being afraid," she said quietly. As they approached the school parking lot, Lila spotted Principal Hendricks talking to two police officers near the front entrance. Word traveled fast at Oak Ridge. She straightened her shoulders and walked toward them, ready to face whatever came next. The quiet girl was gone. And she wasn't coming back. The police station smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Lila sat on a hard plastic chair, her hands folded in her lap, the sleeves of Myra's hoodie pulled down over her bruised knuckles. Across from her, Detective Ruiz flipped through a file, her expression unreadable. "You understand why you're here, don't you, Lila?" Ruiz asked, finally looking up. Lila nodded. She'd been through this before, just not in this town, not at this school. Ruiz sighed. 3 boys in the hospital. One with a broken arm, another with 2 cracked ribs, and Jake Mercer. She paused as if waiting for Lila to react. When she didn't, Ruiz continued, with a dislocated shoulder and a concussion. Lila kept her face blank. She had expected worse. Ruiz leaned forward. "Here's what I don't get. School records say you've never been in a fight before. Teachers describe you as quiet, keeps to herself. And yet, today, you took out 3 varsity athletes like you've been training for it." Lila said nothing. Ruiz opened another folder. "Then I pulled your transfer records. Funny thing, your last school had no disciplinary notes either. Just a single line about withdrawal due to family circumstances." She tapped the paper. "But when I called them, guess what they told me?" Lila's fingers twitched. Ruiz smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "They said you were expelled. For fighting." The air in the room thickened. Lila could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant murmur of officers at their desks. Ruiz pushed a photo across the table. It showed a boy with a swollen eye, a split lip. Sound familiar? Lila didn't look at it. "His name was Derek Valles," Ruiz said. "Star quarterback. Sound like anyone you know?" Lila exhaled slowly. "He started it." Ruiz barked out a laugh. "That's exactly what you said 3 years ago." She leaned back, studying Lila. "So here's my question. Who taught you how to fight like that?" Lila's throat tightened. She could still hear her father's voice in her head. Asterisk, never show them everything you've got. Before she could answer, the door burst open. A man in an expensive suit strode in, his face flushed with anger. "Principal Hendricks just called me," he snapped. "Do you have any idea who Jake Mercer's father is?" Ruiz stood. "Mr. Carter." Lila's head snapped up. Her father didn't even glance at her. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, his voice smooth now, the anger tucked away. "My daughter was defending herself. Those boys attacked her first. There are witnesses." Ruiz crossed her arms. "Your daughter put 3 kids in the hospital. And if she hadn't, she might be the one in that hospital," her father shot back. He finally looked at Lila, his expression unreadable. "We're leaving." Ruiz hesitated, then sighed. "She's suspended pending investigation. And if those parents press charges, They won't, Lila's father said, already steering her toward the door. Outside, the cold air hit Lila like a slap. Her father didn't speak until they were in his car, the engine rumbling to life. Then, quietly, "You were sloppy." Lila stiffened. He adjusted the rearview mirror, his eyes meeting hers in the reflection. "You let him get too close before you reacted. And you didn't check your surroundings before the fight started." He shook his head. "If those boys had been smarter, you'd be in a body bag." Lila stared at him. 3 years. 3 years since he'd last spoken to her like this, like she was still his daughter, still his student. He put the car in drive. "We're not done training." As they pulled away from the station, Lila's phone buzzed. An unknown number. "You fight well. But you'll need to be better. They're coming for you. Asterisk asterisk." Lila's blood ran cold. The text burned in Lila's pocket as her father's car ate up the highway miles. Rain began pattering against the windshield, the rhythmic swish of wipers filling the tense silence. She studied his profile, the same sharp jawline she'd inherited, now shadowed with stubble. When had he started going gray at the temples? "You didn't answer my question," she said finally. "Why now?" His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "You weren't ready before." Ready for what? The car slowed as they approached their old neighborhood. Same cracked sidewalks. Same dying oak tree at the corner. But the garage, her training space, had fresh plywood over the windows. "To finish what we started," he said, killing the engine. Inside, the house smelled of gun oil and stale takeout. A half-disassembled pistol sat on the kitchen table beside a stack of overdue bills. Lila's chest ached at the familiarity. Her father tossed her a duffel bag. "Change. Then meet me out back." The bag held her old training gear, black compression shirt, fingerless gloves, the leather wrist wraps he'd made her for her 14th birthday. As she dressed, her phone buzzed again. Ask him about the winter of 2012. The night the Mercer's warehouse burned, asterisk asterisk. Lila froze. What the hell? Outside, the rain had eased to a mist. Her father stood waiting in the makeshift ring he'd built years ago, 4 wooden posts with ropes strung between them. The mats were newer, recently used. "Who else trains here?" she asked. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You first. Show me you remember." The first punch came without warning. Lila barely dodged, feeling the air part where his fist had been. Muscle memory took over, block, counter, pivot. But he was faster than she remembered, his strikes sharper. "You're holding back," he growled, sweeping her legs out from under her. Lila hit the mat hard. "Why did you really come back?" she spat. He pulled her up roughly. "Because Jake Mercer isn't just some spoiled jock. His uncle runs the underground circuits. And you just put their family name in the dirt." A sick realization dawned. This was a test. Damn right. He threw a combination she barely blocked. "They'll send real fighters after you now. Not schoolyard bullies." Her ribs ached where he'd landed a kick. "What aren't you telling me?" The back door slammed. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, hooded, moving with lethal grace. Lila tensed, but her father didn't react. The stranger pushed back his hood. Piercing blue eyes. A jagged scar running from cheek to jawline. "Hello, little sister," said the boy Lila hadn't seen in 5 years. Her brother, Eli, was supposed to be dead. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the garage roof like impatient fingers. Lila's breath came in ragged gasps as she stared at the brother she'd buried in her memory. Eli stood silhouetted in the flickering porch light, water dripping from his leather jacket. The scar was new, a thick, ropey thing that pulled at the corner of his mouth when he smirked. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. Lila's fists clenched at her sides. "You are a ghost." She turned to her father, whose expression had gone stony. "You told me he died in a car crash." Eli barked a laugh. "That's creative." He stepped into the training space, moving with the same liquid grace Lila remembered from childhood sparring sessions. Only now it was sharper, more dangerous. "What else did Dad tell you while I was gone?" "That Mom's overdose was an accident too." The words hit like a sucker punch. Lila's vision tunneled. She remembered the funeral, the closed casket, The way her father had refused to let her see her mother's face one last time. Her father's voice cut through the memory. Enough. He tossed Eli a pair of gloves. Show me what the circuits taught you. The brothers circled each other, the rain-slick mats gleaming under the bare bulb overhead. Lila backed against the ropes, her mind racing. 5 years. 5 years of thinking Eli was dead, 5 years of swallowing her father's lies. The first strike came like lightning, Eli's lead hook snapping their father's head back. Blood sprayed across the mats. Still dropping your right elbow, Eli taunted as their father staggered. Lila watched in horrified fascination as they traded blows. This wasn't training. There was no rhythm, no restraint. This was something uglier, older, a reckoning years in the making. Eli caught their father with a brutal knee to the ribs. The sickening crack echoed off the garage walls. Stop! Lila launched herself between them, shoving Eli back. What the hell is wrong with you? Eli wiped blood from his lip. Ask him why he really sent me away. Their father slumped against the ropes, breathing hard. When he looked up, his eyes were haunted. The Mercers came collecting debts. I couldn't pay. Lila's stomach dropped. She knew about the gambling, the late-night phone calls, the strangers who'd sometimes show up at the house. But this... Eli yanked up his shirt, revealing a latticework of scars across his abdomen. 2 years in Mercer's fight pits. That's what Dad's debts cost me. The rain intensified, hammering the roof like gunfire. Lila's phone buzzed again, 3 rapid vibrations. She ignored it. You knew, she whispered to her father. You knew Jake was... a Mercer. Yeah. Her father spat blood onto the mats. And now you've put their golden boy in the hospital. Eli grabbed Lila's arm, his grip bruising. They'll come for you. Not with lawyers, with fighters. He jerked his chin toward their father. He brought me back to teach you how to survive what's coming. Lila wrenched free. I don't need your help. The garage door rattled. All 3 of them froze as headlights swept across the walls. A voice called from outside, deep, commanding. Daniel Carter. We know you're in there. Eli's face went pale. That's Victor Mercer. Lila's father reached beneath the mat stack, pulling out a snub-nosed revolver. Eli, take your sister out the back. No. Lila stepped forward. I'm done running. The pounding came again, harder this time. Wood splintered around the doorframe. Eli grabbed Lila's face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen carefully. There's a fight club beneath the school, the old boiler room. Hendricks runs it for the Mercers. That's where they'll take you. Her father chambered around. If you get caught, you fight. You win, you walk away. You lose. I know how fight clubs work, Lila snapped. The door exploded inward. The moment the door splintered open, time fractured into jagged fragments. Victor Mercer filled the doorway like a storm given human form. 6.5 feet of tailored suit and restrained violence. His silvering hair slicked back against the rain. 3 men flanked him, their faces obscured by shadows and the glare of headlights behind them. Lila's father moved first, the revolver steady in his grip. Victor. Been a long time. Victor's smile was a knife wound. Not long enough, Danny. His gaze flicked to Eli, then Lila. I see the whole family's here. Convenient. Eli shifted subtly in front of Lila, his fighter's stance telegraphing readiness. Jake started it. Did he? Victor stepped inside, rainwater pooling around his Italian loafers. Funny, the security footage shows your sister breaking my nephew's jaw in a classroom full of witnesses. Lila's pulse roared in her ears. She could smell the blood still drying on her knuckles, the gun oil on her father's hands. The air hummed with impending violence. Her father's finger tightened on the trigger. What do you want? Victor sighed, as if disappointed. Traditionally, a pound of flesh. But since Jake's still concussed, he withdrew a folded paper from his breast pocket. Hendricks has graciously agreed to expel your daughter. Effective immediately. Lila snatched the paper. The expulsion notice bore yesterday's date, before the fight even happened. This is bullshit. Language, Victor sked. But since we're feeling nostalgic... He nodded to one of his men, who produced a familiar-looking notebook, the one Jake had ripped from Lila in class. We found some interesting reading material. The pages fluttered open to Lila's sketches, detailed diagrams of pressure points, fighting stances, notes on how to break holds. Notes she'd taken during her father's old training sessions. Victor's smile widened. Seems little Lila's been preparing for this a long time. Eli tensed beside her. Get to the point. The point, Victor said, is that talent like this shouldn't go to waste. He tossed the notebook at Lila's feet. Friday night. The boiler room. You fight one of my boys. You win, the expulsion disappears. You lose. His gaze slid to her father. Well, let's just say Danny's debts come due. Lila's father lunged forward, gun raised. You son of a... Victor didn't flinch. Shoot me, and my brother burns this neighborhood to the ground. He adjusted his cufflinks. Your choice, Danny. Either your daughter fights in the circuit, or you watch her die in the streets. The silence that followed was absolute. Lila stepped forward. I'll fight. Victor's grin turned feral. Smart girl. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Eli? Welcome home. The moment their taillights disappeared, Lila's father rounded on her. You have no idea what you just agreed to. Eli caught his arm. She doesn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Lila retrieved her notebook, smoothing the torn pages. What aren't you telling me? Her father's face aged a decade in the dim light. The boiler room isn't just a fight club, Lila. It's a proving ground. Mercer's recruits fighters there, kids who think they're tough, kids with nothing to lose. The ones who impress him. He swallowed hard. They disappear into his organization. Eli's scar twisted as he spoke. And the ones who don't impress him disappear too. Just not breathing. Lila's phone buzzed, another unknown number. He won't send a fighter. He'll send a killer. Ask Eli about Raffelter's... ***. The name made Eli go rigid. Outside, thunder rolled across the neighborhood like a warning. The rain had turned to ice by the time Lila stepped onto Oak Ridge High's campus after midnight. The security guard, paid off by the Mercers, no doubt, merely nodded as she slipped through the side entrance. Eli moved like a shadow beside her, his breath fogging in the frigid air. Torres was 17, he said quietly. Top of his weight class. Mercer had him fight 3 matches in one night. Lila's boots squeaked on the tiled hallway. The school felt alien in the dark, lockers gaping like metal mouths, the distant hum of the boiler the only sign of life. He lost the 3rd fight, she guessed. Eli's jaw tightened. He won. They reached the basement door. A heavy chain hung loose around the handle. Someone had already unlocked it. From below came the muffled thump of bass, the occasional shout. Lila hesitated. Then why? Because winning's not enough for Victor. Eli pressed something cold into her hand, a switchblade. You have to entertain him. The stairwell stank of sweat and mildew. As they descended, the bass grew louder, vibrating through Lila's ribs. The boiler room. It was nothing like she'd imagined. The massive space had been transformed into a makeshift arena. 50, maybe 60 people crowded around a chain-link cage erected where maintenance equipment should have been. The air reeked of blood and cheap beer. A shirtless boy staggered around the cage, his nose broken, his chest heaving. Across from him, a mountainous figure waited, expressionless, his knuckles already taped. Principal Hendricks stood at the edge of the cage, counting cash into a metal lockbox. When he spotted Lila, his smile made her skin crawl. Carter, right on time. He gestured to a hulking man by the cage door. Marcus here will get you suited up. Eli grabbed her arm. Remember, entertain him, Lila finished. Her pulse pounded in her throat as Marcus led her to a makeshift locker area. That's when she saw Mira. Her friend sat on a folding chair, applying makeup under flickering fluorescence. Their eyes met in the mirror, and Myra's expression didn't change. You're the bookie, Lila realized. Mira snapped her compact shut. And you're the main event. She stood, adjusting her blazer, Oak Ridge High colors, the principal's assistant badge gleaming. Jake's watching from the VIP box. She nodded toward a railed balcony where Victor Mercer stood with several men in suits. Jake sat slumped in a wheelchair, his face still swollen. Lila's hands curled into fists. How long? Since freshman year. Myra's smile didn't reach her eyes. Hendricks recruits one student every semester to help run the circuit. Guess who recommended me? The betrayal cut deeper than any punch. Jake. Marcus shoved a sports bra and shorts into Lila's arms. 5 minutes. Alone in the changing area, Lila unfolded the note tucked into her clothes. Rafael Torres won his fights but refused to break his opponent's spine when ordered. They made an example of him. Don't make the same mistake, asterisk asterisk. A knock came at the door. Showtime, Marcus rumbled. The crowd roared as Lila stepped out. Across the cage, her opponent cracked his neck, a college-age guy with prison tattoos and dead eyes. Victor's voice carried over the din. No rules. No time limit. Fight ends when I say it does. The cage door clanged shut behind her. The cage rattled as the lock clicked into place. Lila rolled her shoulders, feeling the tape pull against her knuckles. Across the mat, her opponent, introduced only as Grinner by the leering announcer, cracked his yellowed teeth in a smile that justified the nickname. Little girl lost? He taunted, rotating his thick neck until it popped. Prison tattoos coiled up his arms like snakes. The crowd pressed against the chain links, their breath fogging the metal. Lila caught glimpses of familiar faces, seniors from her chem class, the janitor who always winked at her in the halls, even Mrs. Ruiz from the front office, her prim cardigan swapped for a tight tank top. All here. All complicit. Principal Hendricks' voice boomed over the speakers. Remember folks, this is a no-holds-barred exhibition. Bets close in 30 seconds. Lila's gaze flicked to the VIP balcony. Victor Mercer leaned on the railing, smoking a cigar while Jake slurred something to a blonde girl feeding him grapes. Disgust twisted her stomach. The bell clanged. Grinner lunged without hesitation. His fist grazed Lila's temple as she ducked, the air displacement making her ear pop. She retaliated with a sharp elbow to his ribs, only to gasp as he absorbed the blow like it was nothing. Ah, that's cute. He grabbed a handful of her hair and slammed her face first into the cage. Blood filled Lila's mouth. The crowd roared. Through the haze of pain, she spotted Eli pushing through the spectators, his face grim. He mouthed one word, "Play it." Grinner hauled her up by the hair again. Mercer wants a show? Let's give him. Lila bit down hard on his wrist. When he howled, she drove her knee into his groin. As he doubled over, she grabbed his ears and brought her forehead down on his nose with a sickening crunch. The crowd went wild. Grinner staggered back, blood gushing between his fingers. You bitch! Lila spat a glob of blood onto the mat. You talk too much. What followed wasn't a fight, it was a massacre. Grinner swung wildly, his technique devolving into brute rage. Lila weaved through his attacks, landing precise strikes. A kidney punch here, a shin kick there. Each blow carefully calculated to inflict maximum pain without knocking him out. Entertain him, Victor had said. So she did. When Grinner collapsed to his knees, wheezing, Lila grabbed his chin and forced him to look at the VIP box. This what you wanted, Mercer? She shouted over the crowd. Victor's eyes gleamed. He made a subtle gesture, a thumb drawn across his throat. Grinner whimpered. Lila understood. She ribbit, and stopped her fist an inch from his ruined face. The crowd gasped. No. She released Grinner, who crumpled to the mat. I'm not your executioner. Silence fell. Victor's chair screeched as he stood. You disappoint me, Lila. Before anyone could react, a new voice cut through the tension. That's enough. Every head turned toward the entrance, where a woman in a tailored police uniform stood flanked by officers. Detective Ruiz. Hendricks scrambled to hide the lockbox. This isn't what it. Save it. Ruiz's gaze locked onto Victor. We have warrants for the entire Mercer organization, including you. As chaos erupted, spectators scrambling for exits, fighters being cuffed, Lila noticed two things. First, Mira slipping out a back door with Hendricks' lockbox. Second, the text that appeared on her cracked phone screen. Check the east wall. Your mother left you something before they killed her. Asterisk asterisk. Lila's blood ran cold. The police floodlights turned Oak Ridge High's basement into a surreal battleground. Officers herded fighters and spectators into separate corners, their voices sharp with authority. But Lila's attention was fixed on the east wall, the one behind the cage, where the old brick had been painted over so many times it looked like a scar. Detective Ruiz appeared at her side, her badge catching the light. "We've been after the Mercers for years," she said quietly. "But we never had proof, until tonight." Lila barely heard her. She ran her fingers along the bricks until she found it, a loose one near the floor. With a grunt, she pried it free. Inside the cavity lay a yellowed envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. A Polaroid slid out first, her mother, younger than Lila remembered, standing beside a woman who looked strikingly like Detective Ruiz. Behind them, the old Oak Ridge High sign. The second item was a letter. "My dearest Lila, asterisk if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if Victor found this first, you're in terrible danger, asterisk. Asterisk what happened here wasn't an accident. The Mercers have been using this school to traffic fighters for decades. I tried to stop them. So did your Aunt Elena, asterisk." Lila's head snapped up. "Aunt." Ruiz's face had gone pale. She reached for the photo. "Maria was my sister." The pieces crashed together. The way Ruiz had watched her during interrogations. The file with details no regular cop would have. Eli materialized beside them, his scars standing out livid in the harsh light. "Mom didn't overdose," he said hoarsely. "She was murdered the night she found out Victor was recruiting kids from the foster system." Ruiz nodded. "She hid the evidence here. Then she came to me, but before I could act, she..." Her voice broke. A commotion erupted near the stairs. Victor Mercer was being led out in cuffs, but his eyes locked onto Lila with terrifying promise. "This isn't over, little fighter." Jake, still in his wheelchair, spat at her feet as they passed. "You're dead." Lila didn't flinch. Epilogue. 1 month later. The news called it the largest organized crime bust in state history. Victor Mercer got life without parole. Hendricks turned state's witness, implicating half the school board. Mira disappeared, but the lockbox she stole was found abandoned, empty. Lila stood at her mother's grave for the first time in years, the real story now carved into a new headstone. Asterisk Maria Carter. Beloved mother. Courageous whistleblower, asterisk. Eli nudged her shoulder. "You okay?" She watched their father place flowers beside the stone, his hands steady for the first time since she could remember. "Yeah," she said. "I am." Her phone buzzed, a known number this time. "Please." Asterisk found more files. "Meet me at the station, asterisk." Lila smiled. Some fights weren't finished in cages.